The receipt said one word, anonymous. But 30 years later, they found 2 letters at the bottom. By then, the man who wrote them was gone. January 2nd, 1993, Los Angeles. A black sedan parked across from a diner on Sunset Boulevard. Inside sat a figure, fedora pulled low, collar up, watching. Through the diner window, he could see a man at a corner table, head bowed, hands trembling. Foreclosure notice spread on the table between a cold cup of coffee and an empty future. The figure had been there for 20 minutes. He'd made quiet inquiries earlier that day. A landscaper named David Miller, a family, a house his father built, 30 days left. The kind of story that doesn't make headlines but shatters lives. He'd heard hundreds like it, thousands maybe. But something about this one stayed with him. A man trying to honor his father's memory, a wife working herself to exhaustion, a 7-year-old who didn't understand why her parents stopped smiling. He pulled out a phone, made a call. His voice was quiet, firm. The instruction was simple. 2 sentences. Flag this case. Miller family. 30 days. Full clearance. He hung up, started the engine, and disappeared into the afternoon traffic. Nobody saw him arrive. Nobody saw him leave. Inside that diner, David Miller didn't know someone had been watching. He only knew his world was collapsing. His landscaping business had died 6 months earlier. A lawsuit from a wealthy client drained everything. $18,000 in legal fees. 3 banks rejected him. His brother's $2,000 bought 1 extra month. That was it. $23,000 in debt. His father's house, the one they'd built together, gone in 30 days. Karen worked night shifts at the hospital, but even double shifts couldn't save them. David folded the foreclosure notice, slid it into his jacket. His hands shook. He left $1 on the counter and walked out into the cold January night. He didn't see the black sedan, didn't see it pull away, but the figure saw everything. The next morning, David's phone rang at 10:15. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. Probably another creditor. Another reminder of what he already knew. He answered. A woman's voice. Professional but warm. She explained she was calling from a private charitable organization. They worked with anonymous donors to help families in crisis. His case had been flagged through a referral network. After review, his debt had been approved for full clearance. David laughed. Not a happy sound, a hollow, broken sound. The woman didn't react. She continued calmly. $23,000. No repayment, no conditions, no application process. Just one requirement. He had to come to a bank on Wilshire Boulevard that afternoon. 2:00. David hung up, stared at the phone. His heart hammered. Karen appeared in the doorway, hair still wet from the shower. She asked what happened. He told her. She shook her head. It had to be a scam. But what if it wasn't? They went. The bank was marble and glass, cold, sterile. A manager in a navy suit led them into a private office. He placed a folder on the desk. Inside was a cashier's check. $23,000. The memo line, anonymous. Karen's hands flew to her mouth. David couldn't breathe. The manager explained the funds had been wired that morning from a registered trust. The donor requested complete privacy. No contact, no publicity, just resolution. David signed the papers. His signature barely looked like his own. When he finished, the manager shook his hand. He mentioned he'd been at that branch for 16 years. He'd seen this 3 times. Same fund, same silence. Someone out there was watching people who'd run out of options. They walked out into the sunlight. Karen gripped David's arm like he might vanish. Neither spoke. The world continued around them, but theirs had just been pulled back from the edge. David stopped on the sidewalk and asked the question aloud. Who does this? Karen wiped her eyes. She didn't know. But they still had their home. That evening, Emily met them at the door. She'd been staying with Karen's sister. Her backpack dragged on the floor. Her eyes were tired. She looked up at her father and asked if they'd lost the house. David knelt down. His throat tightened. He pulled her close and told her no, they hadn't. She asked, "How come?" David paused. "How do you explain mercy to a 7-year-old? How do you tell her that somewhere in the world, someone she'll never meet saw her family drowning and threw them a rope? He told her someone had helped them, someone they didn't know." Emily frowned and asked if it was like Santa. David smiled through tears and said yes, kind of like that. She hugged him tight, her small arms around his neck, her breath warm against his shoulder. She whispered that they should say thank you. David held her and promised they would. Every single day, they would. But one question refused to leave. Who sees strangers in the dark and throws them a rope? That voice. He'd heard it somewhere before. That night, David sat on the back porch while Emily slept inside. He kept replaying the phone call, the woman's tone, that calm, that gentleness. But who hired her? Who funded it? Who even knew his name? He tried to find out. Called the number back, voicemail, called the bank, privacy laws, searched online, found scattered mentions of anonymous help. Always the same pattern: sudden contact, immediate resolution, silence. The donor was a ghost. David kept searching. Late at night, after Emily was asleep, he'd sit at the kitchen table with old newspapers, looking for patterns, looking for names. One article mentioned anonymous help in Detroit, another in Houston. Always the same silence, always the same method. Then he found something, a small piece in the back pages, a benefit concert, a quiet donation, and a name that appeared once, buried in the text: Michael Jackson. David stared at the name, the king of pop. Why would someone like that care about a landscaper in Los Angeles? But the timeline matched. The city matched. The silence matched. 2 weeks passed. The foreclosure was canceled. David started accepting small landscaping jobs again, slowly rebuilding. Karen reduced her hours. Emily's smile came back. Life resumed, quietly, gratefully. But the question never left. Who saved us? Then Karen found the article. She'd been cleaning out the garage on a Saturday morning in late January, sorting old boxes, throwing out junk. She found a stack of newspapers David's father had saved. 1991, 1992, random issues. One fell open, February 1992, a local newspaper, community section. The headline, "Anonymous Benefactor Saves 3 Families from Foreclosure." Karen read it twice, then called for David. The article described 3 families in Los Angeles who'd received last-minute help in early 1992. All foreclosures, all cleared by an unnamed donor. The fund refused to comment. The families only knew one thing: someone had been watching. And when the moment came, that someone acted. David stared at the article. The pattern matched. The method. The silence. Karen pointed to a quote near the end. A social worker mentioned the donor had one condition: the families could never know who helped them, because the act wasn't about recognition, it was about mercy. David felt something shift in his chest. Whoever did this had been doing it for years, quietly, consistently, while the world looked the other way. But who? The answer was closer than he thought. Then the performance happened. David hadn't planned to watch it. The Super Bowl wasn't really his thing, but that year, everyone was talking about the halftime show. Michael Jackson. The first time a major artist would perform at halftime. Historic. A co-worker, a guy named Rick, mentioned it that week. Told David he had to watch. Maybe he needed to see something bigger than their struggle. Karen agreed. So he did. January 31st, 1993. Rose Bowl, Pasadena. Super Bowl 27 halftime show. Over 90,000 people in the stadium. More than 100 million watching from home. David sat in his living room, the TV glowing in the dark. The energy was electric. The stadium erupted. And then he appeared. Black military-style jacket with gold accents, black fedora. The stage exploded with lights and sound. The performance was flawless. Every step, every spin, every note. The audience screamed, wept, reached toward the stage like they could touch the divine. David watched, mesmerized. He hadn't felt anything this big in months, maybe years. Halfway through the set, the music paused. The performer stood center stage, breathing hard. He removed his fedora, spoke into the microphone. His voice was soft, almost a whisper. He talked about growing up without much, learning early that the people who need help most are often the ones nobody sees. He paused. The arena fell silent. His next words were quiet but clear. When he could, he tried to see them, and sometimes he acted. Not for cameras, not for headlines, just because somebody had to. The sound from the stage made him freeze. That voice. David's breath caught. That tone, that softness, the way he said those words. I try to see them. It was the same presence from the phone call, not literally the same voice, but the essence, the calm, the gentleness, the quiet conviction that said, I see you. You're not alone. David's hands gripped the armrests. His chest tightened. Could it be? He thought about the black sedan outside the diner, the figure he never saw, the phone call that came from nowhere, the article about anonymous help stretching back years. The pieces started connecting. The crowd cheered, but David barely heard them. His mind was racing. The timeline, the method, the silence, the voice. After the performance, David sat on the couch long after the TV went dark. Karen had gone to bed. He just sat, thinking. When he finally stood up and walked to the bedroom, Karen was awake. She saw his face, asked what happened. He told her about the voice, about the things said on stage, about the feeling that clicked into place. She asked if he really thought it was him. David nodded. He couldn't prove it, but he knew. What he did next, nobody expected. It took David 3 years to save enough, $5,000. He found a single mother about to lose her apartment, rent arrears, eviction notice, 2 kids. He paid it, anonymously, through a lawyer. No name, no contact, just resolution. Then he helped another family, then another. He called it the Anonymous Fund. Never used his name, never took credit, just acted. The way someone once acted for him. He'd tell people kindness doesn't need a signature, it just needs to move. Karen kept the receipt from the bank, framed it in their hallway. 30 years later, the ink is faded, almost illegible, but the word anonymous is still visible. And beneath it, in handwriting so small they almost missed it, 2 letters, MJ. They never got confirmation. They never needed it. The debt was paid, the house was saved, a life was rebuilt. And somewhere in the silence, a question lingers. How many others? How many moments like this happened in the dark? How many hands reached out when no one was watching? David doesn't know, but he believes. And every time someone asks about the frame on his wall, he smiles. He says it's not a receipt, it's proof. Proof that mercy is real. That kindness doesn't wait for applause, that someone, somewhere, sees you when you think you're invisible. The performance ended decades ago. The lights went dark. The voice went silent. But the gift never stopped. It echoed. Through David, through his fund, through every family he helped, through every envelope with no return address. Some debts can't be repaid, but they can be passed forward. And that's what David did, for the rest of his life. Because one night in January 1993, someone saw him and didn't look away.